This presentation is about qualitative research methods. What is qualitative research? Well, qualitative research is a strategy used to systematically collect, organize, and interpret non-numerical data that is typically based on people's attitudes, beliefs, opinions, experiences, basically what motivates people, what causes people to behave the way they do. We typically use it in the humanities and social sciences, and we use it to understand how people directly experience the world. We want to focus on the why, not the what. So, some common approaches to qualitative research are grounded theory, which is one of the more common ones, and personally, one of the ones I like to use the most. It is data that is collected on a topic of interest, and then theory is developed inductively. Then we have ethnography, and that's research that's engaged in groups or organizations because we want to understand their culture. Action research is when we collaborate between the researcher and the participant to link our theory to the practice. Phenomenological research is when we investigate by describing and interpreting participants' experiences that they live or they are living. Narrative research, we look at stories and try to understand how participants perceive and understand some of their own experiences. Some research methods that we use whenever we're doing qualitative research. We do observations, which is basically recording what we see, hear, what we encounter in a natural setting. So, like where the participant works or lives or has the experience. Interviews are typically one-on-one conversations between the researcher and the participant using open-ended questions. Focus groups are usually questions that we ask to a larger group, and then there's a discussion within the group about the different beliefs and attitudes that people might have based on the question. Surveys are typically open-ended questionnaires that are typically in digital format, and the person will answer those questions and give reasons for those answers. And then secondary research is typically existing data like videos, transcripts, etc. All right, so what are some steps for data analysis? So we want to prepare and organize our data, and then we want to review and explore that data. And then we want to also then take it and we want to develop a data coding system. And once we've developed our coding system, then we want to assign those codes to the data. And then we want to look for recurring themes. So what could be some of our analysis approaches? Well, we could do content analysis, which would describe and categorize common words, phrases, and ideas. We could have a thematic analysis approach, which would identify and interpret patterns and themes. We could have a textual analysis approach, which would examine the content, structures, and designs of text. Or we could have a discourse analysis, which would study communication and how language is used to achieve effects in specific context. So here are some steps for qualitative research. If you're going to begin the process, you've got to start with your question. What is your research question? You want it to be broad and flexible. It's a beginning point. It's something that may evolve during the process. You might change it during your process. You want it to give clarity and direction and focus to the study. It's the how and why of why humans interact and why they interact the way that they do. We want it to be based around how someone is experiencing an event or condition, and we want it to show what the researcher wants to know about the perspectives and interactions of others. Now, the second step would be to choose a research method. Again, those are grounded theory, ethnography, action, phenomenological, or narrative. Then we want to, as our third step, collect data. First of all, what is our study site? We want it to be the natural environment of the person or the corporation, whatever we're doing and whoever we're interviewing, observing, whether that's in their natural environment or we're in the field um, doing that. Observations, are they unobtrusive or are we as researchers be a participant? So unobtrusive meaning, are we watching from afar to see kind of an anonymous presence ourselves to see what's happening. Interviews, they're typically the 101 or they could be in groups for group discussions. And then we're going to look at documents and artifacts, whether those are pre existing, like newspapers or articles, photographs, or they're generated, like surveys and videos. Our fourth step is to analyze the data. We're going to prepare and organize the data. We're going to review and explore so that we can focus on relevant data. We want to develop our coding system, and that's basically just breaking down our data and giving it a systematic order that will help us organize and group it into similar categories. Um, Coding system on its own can be a lesson. So, coding systems really are finding like keywords and phrases that you're going to use to identify different parts of data. So, for example, if you were going to code a video, you would want to look at a transcript if you could, and then try to um, give codes to what you're seeing as behaviors, what's being said on the video, and then finding similarities between those that maybe you can put into categories. You'll assign your codes and then you'll identify those recurring themes. Fifth, you want to document your findings. So you'll write a report that contains all the steps with findings that include raw data from your participants, like quotes, videos you've taken of them, recordings of interviews. These can be in first person and often are. Usually they're presented as very complicated and detailed narratives. You want to use visual aids like charts and tables and graphs to show your data. And then you want to be able to explain and interpret the patterns um, as they relate to what your research question was. Now, what are some advantages of qualitative research? Well, it's really flexible. You can adapt it as new ideas or patterns come about in your research. It usually takes place in a natural setting. It's a real world kind of context. It's very meaningful because it's going to describe people's experiences, feelings, perceptions, and it can be used to improve the quality of something. And then it might also generate new ideas for research. Now, what are some disadvantages of qualitative research? Well, it can be unreliable if it's not controlled well and if you don't, plug in some kind of a coding system, and then there are factors that you can't control that might affect uh, data. And it's subjective. So you can't really go and replicate this specific research study. And then it's also typically, it's going to be the researcher's interpretation of the material and like what they're looking for. It can be biased. And it's limited. It usually uses small samples of data. Um, okay, that is the end of the PowerPoint. Thank you so much.